All right, this is still 11.1. It's 11.1c, which is the third part of 11.1. There's quite a bit to know about simplifying radicals. And this one will be about radicals with conjugates. Before we get to conjugates, I'm going to review all the ways that you multiply with a radical. Multiply with radicals. So when you're just multiplying 3 times radical 2, that equals 3 radical 2. If I was multiplying negative 3 times radical 2, that's negative 3 radical 2. And if I'm multiplying radical 2 times 3, well, we always put the regular number out front and then the radical. Very much like if you were multiplying a times 3, you would write 3a. So you treat these radicals very much the way you would treat a variable. So if I was multiplying 3 times 3a, that would be 9a. And the same thing for a radical, 3 times 3 radical 2. Well, I multiply what's on the outside, 9, and I would get 9 radical 2. And if I was multiplying 3 radical 3 times 4 radical 5, we learned before that that would be 12, multiply what's on the outside, and then multiply what's under the radical. So 12 radical 15. So when you're dealing with a conjugate, here's what a conjugate is. If I have 3 plus radical 2, not 3 times, but 3 plus radical 2, it's like I'm combining a radical with a regular number. You can't actually add them together, just like you can't add 3 plus a. You just leave them separate. But the conjugate of 3 plus radical 2 is 3 minus radical 2. The conjugate means I'm just taking whatever the sign is and changing it. Plus, I change to minus. Now, what does that do? Well, if you multiply 3 radical 2 times its conjugate, it's like you're multiplying a binomial times a binomial, which means it's just like foiling. So let's go back to foiling. If I had a plus 2 times a minus 2, and I was going to FOIL it, I would first distribute the first one twice. So a times a is a squared. A times negative 2 is negative 2a. 2 times a is positive 2a. And negative 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. I have negative 2 plus 2 in the middle, and so they cancel out, and I get a squared minus 4. We're going to do almost the same thing with these two radical expressions. So I have 3 times 3, which is 9. 3 times negative radical 2, which is negative 3 radical 2. Now, radical 2 times 3 is positive 3 radical 2. And the last one, radical 2 times negative radical 2, is negative radical 4. These two that are in the middle, negative 3 radical 2 plus 3 radical 2, they cancel out. So you end up with 9 minus radical 4, which is 9 minus 2, which is 7. So what we learned from the inside here, you can add radicals. 3 radical 2 plus 3 radical 2 equals 6 radical 2. Again, it's very much like dealing with variables. 3a plus 3a is 6a. If I 3a minus 3a is 0. Same thing with radicals. 3 radical 2 minus 3 radical 2. 3 minus 3 is 0 times radical 2, is 0 times anything, equals 0. If I have 5 radical 2 plus 3 radical 2, As long as the radicals are the same, I can combine these and get 8 radical 2. 5 radical 2 minus 8 radical 2 would give me negative 3 radical 2. If the radicals are different, I cannot combine them. So 5 radical 2 plus 3 radical 2, can't combine it. It's as simplified as it can be. Okay, so let's go back to conjugates again. So if I have, here's my example, 2 over 6 minus radical 3. I can't keep that radical 3 in the bottom, but I can't just multiply by radical 3 to get rid of it. I have to multiply by the conjugate, which is 6 plus radical 3. And if I do that on the bottom, I have to do it on the top. So I'm multiplying both the bottom and the top by the conjugate. On the top, it distributes, and you get 12 plus 2 radical 2. On the bottom, I have to FOIL. 6 times 6 is 36, plus 6 radical 3, minus 6 radical 3, minus radical 9. The 2 in the middle will cancel. I have 36 minus radical 9, which is 36 minus 3, which gives me 33 on the bottom. And this is the answer to simplifying that original problem. Not easy, so let's do another one. We're going to do 8 over 3 minus radical 2. Well, we have to think about what the conjugate is of 3 minus radical 2. It would be 3 plus radical 2. So we multiply the top and the bottom by 3 plus radical 2. On the top I distribute. I get 24 plus 8 radical 2. On the bottom, I need to FOIL. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times radical 2 is 3 radical 2. 3 times negative radical 2 is negative 3 radical 2. Negative rad 2 times rad 2 is negative rad 4. The middle cancels. I have 9 minus rad 4, which is 9 minus 2, which is 7. That goes on the bottom, and this is my answer simplified. Okay, I'm going to do one that's slightly harder. We're going to do 2 rad 5 over negative 4 plus rad 8. So think about what the conjugate is. All we do is change the sign in the middle of the two of them. The other signs remain the same. So the conjugate is negative 4 minus rad 8. So that means on the top, we're multiplying by negative 4 minus rad 8. Oops, same as the bottom. On the top, I'm distributing this whole thing times this. So that would give me negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 rad 5 minus 2, and then I'm multiplying rad 5 times rad 8, which would be rad 40. On the bottom, I have to FOIL. I get negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Negative 4 times negative rad 8, positive 4 rad 8, minus 4 rad 8, minus rad 64. The middle cancels. 16 minus rad 64 which is just plain 8, gives me 8 on the bottom. This one has another step because rad 40 can be simplified. So that minus 2 rad 40, let me just think of it as, we know there's a minus in between, and I'm simplifying 2 rad 40. So I'm going to bring down the 2. Rad 40 is rad 4 times rad 10. So that's 2 times 2 times rad 10, which is 4 rad 10. So this has changed to negative 8 rad 5 minus 4 rad 10 all over 8. And we're going to leave it like this. There's actually one more thing that could be simplified, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We won't have any that are quite that hard. Okay, now your assignment is to go to page 844. We're still at the top of the page in section 11.1, and you are to do number 23 and 25 as best you can. And you have to show me that tomorrow as well as the notes from this video.